Welcome to OTR's A Friendly Debate, a show where lawyers debate topics ranging from pop culture to philosophy and everything in between. Our lawyers debate passionately in the hopes that the moderator will give them a point, or a gold star, or maybe even a pat on the back. We aim to change the hearts and minds of our listeners, but I'm sure we fall short every single time. My name is Lando, and I'll be moderating this episode that, quite frankly, had me questioning everything. So, here's hoping that my friends will talk me through it. The topic for tonight is free will versus determinism. Do we have free will? Or has everything already been determined? Let's meet our debaters. We have our patent attorney. He came in today with a sense of confidence that has me feeling reassured that tonight won't be a complete wreck.
As opposed to other episodes.
We have Pat. How are you feeling?
I gotta say, I feel great. I biked here, which was the most pleasant experience I've had getting to the recording studio in a very long time. But yeah, no, I think this was just kind of fun to research, and I don't imagine this will get as antagonistic, for example, as Beatles versus Stones or Seinfeld versus The Office. So really, what we're hoping for tonight is just to pull out that big W. For once and for all, get some points in my column here. So,
all right.
Yeah, I don't know.
Pat, as always, you'll have an opponent, our personal injury attorney, that I guess strictly believes in free will and no one's life is predetermined whatsoever. We don't have a mini here, but we do have a moocher. Mucci.
Oh my God. What an introduction.
Mucci, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. Anything for this episode? Did you research at all?
I did, a little bit, yeah. And I did grow up Catholic, so I grew up with a belief in free will, so I think that's kind of colored a lot of my, belief system.
Wait, Lando, were you raised Catholic?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And you're no longer Catholic?
We're not going to get too much into religion here. I do have a cross on my arm.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You came out, suns out, guns out earlier.
Yeah.
Well, I suppose me and Mucci are, former Catholics?
Yeah.
Raised Catholics? Yeah. I am hoping, though, that, we'll kind of stick to the metaphysics of this stuff and not veer too much into religion.
No, I think, yeah.
But yeah, no, it's good that there's sort of that background experience with the topic.
I kind of have kept that belief with me, though, to some extent. It'll be interesting to discuss it.
I was going to say that I don't think I'm going to let you guys go too far into either religion or politics, which I think this topic could definitely get into, heavily into religion or heavily into politics too. So we're going to try to stay away from that. But just as a reminder to everyone, the breakdown of the debate is as follows. A brief opening statement for each debater, followed by my questions where for tonight, I'll basically let them ramble. And we'll wrap up with closing arguments.
Really priming our listeners here for a great episode. It is going to be just three white guys rambling on for an hour. Very much a new format in podcasting, pushing these boundaries.
And after that...
Much like The Office did.
After that, I'll come up with a decision of some sort. So do you guys have any comments, questions, or concerns?
I think my only concern is that my phone isn't silenced. Let me take care of that.
All right, please do. But at this time, I would like to bring up something that's kind of been bothering me for quite some time now. I'd like to bring up an appeal. I didn't want us to really go down this road so early on in the show's run, but I've been holding this in, and I really just can't stand with the injustice anymore. So, 2 episodes ago, in Aliens vs. Ghosts, an objection was overruled, apparently. The moderator at that time, I won't name any names, but the moderator allowed a shifting of the burden. My argument for this appeal is that basically that the episode was called Aliens vs. Ghosts, and Mucci slyly shifted the burden, getting the moderator to forget the actual title, and instead rule on whether exist or whether both aliens and ghosts are equally ridiculous. Mucci
So we're saying it should have been neither aliens nor ghosts.
I think he should have
title here.
Right. I think he should have picked a stance, and because he failed to do so, he instead placed the burden straight on my shoulders. And if the two of you will allow me, I'd like to introduce into evidence 2 clips from the episode.
I'm going to convince you not that ghosts exist, but that the existence of aliens that have actually visited our planet and abducted people is just as implausible as the existence of ghosts.
So we're looking at here, Orlando has taken on the burden of actually trying to prove his side. For Mucci, you're presenting plausible alternatives and generally skepticism. Yeah, is what you've presented.
So I think that decision is very much within the spirit of the show. And really this appeal is just somebody being a sore loser and attempting to just, flip over the table on this arbitrary, what should be a friendly debate.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is my whole point. The moderator/judge is making Mucci's argument for him. This is why the appeal was raised. Mucci, if you have a response
for me, because I brought up in the clip you heard, I brought up the fact that I wasn't trying to argue that ghosts. I was trying to argue that stories of ghost sightings are no more outrageous than stories of alien sightings, and I feel like I did that, right?
Yeah, I don't think it's beyond the scope of being the moderator here to try and move things along. I mean, certainly that was Mucci's role during
frame the
Beatles versus Stones.
Mucci's
like, I know more about this than either of you.
If that were the point of the show, I feel like we could, during the Beatles versus Stones, I think I could have argued both of them are great bands. Give it to me. I take the win because they're both good bands. Who would disagree with that?
A sore loser is a sore winner.
Okay, I guess this is not going to go.
It raised. We'll have.
It's not going to go anywhere between us. I think we should take this straight to the appeals court, the court of public opinion. So if you think that we should do another Aliens versus Ghost episode properly with new content, feel free to reach out on social media. But that's the last I'm going to bring up about that.
Well, it has to be a poll, right? It has to be people saying we shouldn't, right?
Yeah. I mean, if they're not responding, then I guess they don't care one way or the other.
True.
With that said,
about us.
Okay, so for this episode, I promise I'll rule fairly on the topic. I won't hold it against sneaky Mucci, but let's flip a coin to start. Mucci, call it.
All right, tails.
Christ. What do we got there? All right, so it's heads. That's to me. I think I would like to start, just kind of get out of the gate, start being able to prove my point without hopefully any interruption from anyone that might choose to do so.
All right, start your opening statement, counsel.
All right, so determinism, right? What is it? What are its implications? Let's dive in. So we know very simply, you push something, it's going to move. You heat water up eventually, it's going to boil and create steam. These are predictable, causal chains here. So the underlying aspects of determinism are that based on knowledge of one thing, you can predict a successive event. And starting with knowledge of an event, you can also, somewhat backwards, predict what conditions led to it. Or no, because it's already happened. And so we start at a chemistry level that we know how atoms relate to one another. Let's just scale it up a little bit. Talk about single-celled organisms, for example. They essentially operate according to chemical principles. A virus or a bacteria, for example, which maybe are multiple cells, they don't have, a mind, a sense of being, as far as I might understand. If there's any objections on that, I'd love to hear them. And yet they move around, arguably are alive, but, they're not making decisions. They're completely just, machines essentially operating according to nature. We have, if you scale up to plants, plants do things. They can move, they can grow. And yet the entire ability of a plant is governed by these same natural laws. And so building up in complexity, it sort of follows then that humans are made out of stuff, that stuff follows natural laws. And so if we are made out of stuff, and we are bound by these natural laws, that our actions, the things that we do as the cell moves around, as the plant grows, are similarly governed by these natural laws. And so that essentially there is no choice, because starting from where things were, at the beginning of the universe or when we were born, that those preconditions have essentially predetermined everything that is going to happen. That choice destroys that causality and breaks those natural laws. So that's, I think, the start to finish of it. So I hope to really dig into this today, talk about things from materialism to information theory, and just work through it. And by the end, hopefully we'll convince our unbiased, can I say that?
Yeah.
Moderator.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you for that, Pat. Mucci?
We as humans have free will. Free will is what separates us from all other life on this planet, from single-celled organisms to animals to plants, and from artificial intelligence that can make informed, quote-unquote, informed decisions. Plato and Aristotle posited that humans have free will. According to Plato, humans are striving for inner justice, where spirit and reason allow you to guide yourself into doing what is right and proper, and to tamp down your inner passions. For Plato, in the absence of this sense of justice, people are slaves to their passions. Freedom, then, or free will, is to master your inner self and temper your base desires to make decisions that are right and good, or bad. Aristotle focuses more on the fact that we as humans have the power to either do something or not do it, and we engage in voluntary actions that we are aware of and originate inside of us. And as mature humans, we deliberate before making decisions, and hopefully make rational decisions. Aristotle believed that consistent good choices would result in a person who is overall virtuous, whereas consistent bad choices would result in a vicious person over time, sort of like the honor bar in Red Dead Redemption. For Aristotle, becoming virtuous or vicious over time is in our power as humans. And even though we are in this way shaped by our past decisions, it still remains open to the individual person to do or not do what they in fact end up doing. In addition, Epicurean philosophers believe that all things, including the human soul, are composed of atoms, which behave according to certain laws, as Pat discussed. However, atoms are susceptible to swerves or departures from their usual set paths. Human free will allows us, although we are composed of atoms and must behave according to those laws, to make these non-deterministic swerves from the path of determinism. Studies of the brain cannot nail down a specific part or parts of the body or of the brain that are implicated in our free will to make decisions. In fact, the studies have yielded the result that our brains seem to commit to certain decisions before we become aware of having made them. However, even if our brains seem to commit to decisions before we become aware, we still have a little window, however brief, to fully commit to that decision and to decide differently. Our brains are formed by our experiences throughout our lives, which would make it more likely for us to decide a certain way and more difficult to stray from that path of nature, but we still can make a choice in every situation to act differently, no matter how difficult it might be. As one of my favorite philosophers, the late great Neil Peart, put it, if you choose not to decide, you have still made a choice. Just like him, I will choose free will.
Interesting.
That fucking Red Dead Redemption honor bar, I hate it. I was just walking through the woods when I was playing it, and there's like some stagecoach or something. They just start shooting at me, so I'm like, okay. So I shoot the guy that's shooting at me, and then everybody else starts shooting at me. I'm like, okay, I guess I have to like kill 5 people.
Did you
have
the choice?
Well, you better go ahead and hide these dead bodies, or else people will find. And so I'm just like, God damn it. And like all of a sudden I'm just like way into the like villain side. I'm like, I had no choice in this.
It's self-defense. I like that you brought that up, Mucci, because I know you've been playing a lot of Red Dead recently. But yeah, thanks for that. I noticed that a lot of it was in response to Pat. Seemed like it was a well-thought response to Pat. It's almost as if you knew what he was going to say before he said it.
Yeah, I'm open about my research notes, but I didn't see anything in Mucci's folder, so...
It's added today.
So can we kind of kick things off with the materialist perspective? Because
this is how we'll start it off, because I do have the questions for you guys.
Okay. You're taking back the wheel here.
Because I mean, I get you guys had your openings, and I just want a little bit more of a definition on each side, so that listeners will fully, well, maybe not fully, but they'll at least kind of understand what you guys were talking about. So, Pat, if you want to start with just kind of a overview of what determinism is.
Yeah, so, of course, like anything we're going to talk about today, there's a bunch of different aspects of it, but I think reducing it to its basic parts requires at least causality and then the ability of being able to know something. So, actually, I'm going to start with the latter one because I think that's something that me and Mucci have in common. I think the easiest way to look at it is through the basis of materialism. Mucci kind of mentioned it, but in essence, it's the idea that all matter is made of atoms. Those atoms have protons, electrons, and neutrons, and so on down. And so there's laws about the way that's organized. There's for things not matter like light, photons, etc. There's similar principles that govern the behavior of those. And this goes back to like Lucretius, 100 BC, the first century BC, or earlier if you're a Greek scholar. And the idea that things are made of smaller things, that the world is material, these conclusions can kind of be drawn just from observations of the natural world. That, we've drank the same water as the dinosaurs, that something can't be made out of nothing, etc. It doesn't have to be just materialist. You can talk about just anything information that can encompass information about how atoms are structured to make up a person, about how things are moving, their particular places. So anyways, so sort of the basis of determinism is being able to know about what is going on in, we could say the world, a broader scope, the universe, or in even the broadest scope, everything. That because individual things have effects on others, if you start from a point of knowing, like a snapshot essentially, that if you are able to know all that and know all the laws according to which things move and animate and interact with one another, that you can then predict the next snapshot and so on and so forth. So yeah.
Are you saying that the atoms themselves are all predetermined and that just comes out as, because the atoms are moving in a predetermined fashion, so is everything else? Or why do you bring up the atoms?
So everything's made out of something, some material. And that material moves, according to natural laws. If I push you, you'll feel a force back and maybe move unless I push you very weakly. If we throw something off of your balcony, it's going to fall. Except for if there's wind. And if you knew about the thing that you were going to throw and how you were going to throw it, if you knew about the wind, then you could figure out where it's going to fall in a very simple way. Gravity between things is a natural law. Atoms and their particles can be bound by it. Even light is bent by gravity. That's sort of a fundamental aspect. And, there's crazy geometry and places in space where that kind of breaks down. And we can go into that, but the idea is that we know things as we see them and perceive them are made of other stuff. That smaller fundamental pieces operate according to fundamental rules. And so if an atom by itself has predetermined sort of motions, we know how that works more or less. And if you can predict the way a single atom is going to work, you can predict the way that two of them interact, you can predict the way that collections of them in a compound can interact, like a protein or something. You can predict then things that are made of atoms, like single-celled organisms, how they interact, and then you can just keep scaling it up. And of course, the amount of information or knowledge that's needed to predict things grows as you consider more complex systems. But humans are made of cells, and so if everything that a human is made of these predictable sub-pieces, then the whole is also predictable. Because we are material, we're made of things, those things are predictable, there's no room for free will. This is causation. And so this free will, an idea that if you're able truly to choose, breaks that causation, breaks those natural laws and operates against them.
So is there no way for a human to act in an unpredictable way? Like if you did something outrageous, that would be outrageous, but it wouldn't necessarily be unpredictable?
I did want to talk about this, actually. So,
Since it came up.
yeah. I'm not just going to talk for half an hour and then expect Mucci to be silent.
I was kind of hoping that Mucci would then go on and define his side.
It just was an interesting thought that came up as I was listening to Pat, was that, obviously I think on my side, explaining it through free will would be...
Well, I don't expect you to argue my point.
No, exactly. But,
But he expects you to argue a point.
And I will. But
Please don't tell us that both sides are ridiculous.
both sides are ridiculous. They have no basis in explaining our world. But so I think a human can make rational decisions, and that there's some element of choice there. But I also think it goes on to the predictability aspect of it. We are made up of atoms, but how would you explain, I guess, any sort of, as I mentioned in my opening, swerves from a deterministic path, or like kind of a something that's unpredictable? Is something that's unpredictable actually still very predictable?
Yeah. So, okay, I guess we're getting into this rabbit hole.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I appreciate the Euclidean aspect of things, that sure, everything might be material, but there's this idea of swerve that you can deviate, at a fundamental atomic, or you can nudge that in certain ways, and that, okay, because there's this swerve on the smallest piece, that, okay, a complex system like human made out of the smaller pieces can then have some way to do it. So there's two things I want to say about that. One, extending the materialism to the way, like a theory of mind aspect of it, and two, poking holes in like what the fuck actually is swerve. So yeah, I mean, like I think that how is choice made? Because I think that I think about things. I have some curiosity, and
I think I have thoughts, right?
Yeah.
Feelings.
But I have this sense that as belonging to a body, there is a brain in my head, and there's a certain aspect of it that controls my ability to speak. There's neurons that are activated when in response to stimuli, and that those activations and things change based on, say, if it's winter or summer. Say if you recently had a breakup. Say your chemistry, your brain chemistry has changed, either because you're taking drugs, if you've smoked pot or had a beer or two, or if you're severely fucking depressed and your brain chemistry is not having enough serotonin. That, if you look at it from an empirical perspective, changes people's behavior. And so what I think about it is that so much of the mind, the thoughts we have, our reactions to things, are governed by chemistry, are governed by the way matter, brain matter reacts to that chemistry, that what is our actions, they might be volitional, caused by, that system of the brain and chemistry, that all comes down to operating on a chemical level, on that atomic level. So to bring it to swerve, which is possibly the way to say that, okay, all this operates according to these laws once that swerve is introduced. What the fuck is that, actually? There's, as far as I read, no actual explanation of where that comes from. Can swerve, is that a thought that you have, swerve? Is it completely something that we can't perceive that causes the swerve? That if choice is the result of that swerve, what the hell's going on there?
So I'll just interject here, because I'm just going to have Mucci explain your side.
Okay.
We're getting pretty far in here. I don't want to get too lost in the weeds with determinism before even talking about free will. So just so that we can...
Well, I just opened the door, man.
Yeah. I was just going to, I guess, respond to that. Well, Pat, it was actually Epicurean philosophers.
Fuck me. Actually.
Actually. But it was, the idea of swerve was that we, humans are composed of atoms, and behave according to the laws of atoms, as Pat had said. But atoms are susceptible to swerves or departures from a typical path that they might follow. So free will is explained in those swerves from the path of determinism. And okay, yes, we are made up of atoms, and we behave according to the laws of nature and the laws of chemistry and physics and everything like that. And you can explain a lot of our behavior from that as well. Mm-hmm. But we do make decisions. Like, yes, we do operate on routine a lot of the time. You know, we get up in the morning and follow the same routine, and that's not a lot of decision making goes into that. But in that, there still are decisions of, you know, oh, I really should get going. I should really hop out of the shower now. I should, you know, move a little faster. I should do this or do that. Are those not all decisions we're making that are our will? I mean, what is controlling that, I suppose, is the question that we're trying to get at. I think the philosopher that I did respond to the most was was Aristotle, more than, you know, the Epicurean philosophy, because he does sort of explain it in a way that does maybe introduce a bit of a paradox, which is like, you know, we are formed by our decisions. He admitted that we are, as individual beings, are formed by our decisions that we've made throughout our life. So if you've made a lot of good decisions, or, you know, decisions throughout your life that have made you into a virtuous or vicious person, you are, you know, yes, you probably are more likely to make more virtuous decisions if you're an overall good, virtuous person, and you know, vice versa. But VV. But within that, VV, vice versa. Yeah. Within that is the, you know, the idea that each individual decision we still make on that basis of is, you know, good or bad. You know, I think a bad person can make a decision still that is good. It may be harder because it's probably against their nature over time, the person they've developed into, but they can still make a good or bad decision, right?
I mean, you know, I think that gets more to the morality aspect of it, of the effects of free will versus determinism. But I want to separate from like a decision that someone makes. There's two parts to that. There's the thing that actually happens.
Yeah.
And then there's the aspect of thinking to do the thing. And so where does that decision-making process come from? Where is that choice made? Is it something that resides in the brain? Is this something that is just a unknowable, non-material force that is, you know, manifesting itself through the human mind? Like, where is it located? Can you hold this free will in your hand? You know, can you cut it out of someone's, you know, brain with a scalpel?
I don't think so. I don't think there's any one part of the brain that is like the free will part of the brain. I mean, there are decision-making, you know, parts of the brain involved in decision-making, but of course. But
do you guys have here's a question. Do you guys have, like, for both sides, you have some kind of like almost tangible example of, you know, a free will scenario, a determinism scenario, just some sort of example that for our listeners to kind of grasp these concepts a little bit more, other than just talking about these, you know, kind of grand concepts in terms of basically what is life.
Well, would it be better to explain the same scenario from different perspectives?
Then absolutely. Go, if one of you wants to start off.
Like, you know, I guess, Pat, would you argue that, you know, someone who steals something, you know, if they're not well off, that was like determined that they would, because of their circumstances and their nature, the person they become over time, and having to deal with maybe hardships and difficult circumstances, it's determined that they would, you know, steal, you know, a loaf of bread for their family or something like that. Because I would argue that there's still a choice in that moment, you know, even if you're, you know, obviously desperate to feed your family and everything, to still not do that, right? And not trying to get into the morality of that circumstance, but just as an example of that would be somewhere where it may be hard for me to argue that there's free will, because it's not really often a choice, you know, in that moment. But still
Does this
there's a
example
decision that's made.
does this example just
To do
make it
something about
nature versus nurture then? In this specific example.
Well, no.
I mean, it's
Well,
both.
I mean, kind of, right? Yeah,
It's,
I don't know.
You can see in determinism, I think, that a system responds to stimuli.
Mm.
You know, I think there's observable things. You can look at sociology and make a statistic of people in these conditions tend to act this way. But I don't think that's the level at which determinism operates. These, you know, empirical sort of observations we can make as humans, which are very limited perception of the world, means that, okay, yeah, sociologically you can know that people are more disposed, humans are more disposed to act in a certain way depending on conditions.
Mm-hmm.
But what happens when that is done? This is what makes a person physically stand up and go out and do that action.
Mm-hmm.
It's not reason behind it. What it is that you have a human, which is a collection of matter that receives information that changes its state based on outside stimuli. For example, that stimuli can be growing up and like not having enough to eat, or being cold and shit like that. That's going to change the structure and the matter of that human being.
Right.
And so it's not necessarily a choice. And by the way, I mean, one of the struggles I have here is I live my life as if I have free will. And, you know, so this is going to come off
Hopefully
as really
we all
fucking
do.
callous from a sociological, legal perspective. And I don't want to have that be the case at all.
I think we...
But still, it's just the action that you take is predetermined based on what chemically is going on in your brain. Like, literally, what is the stuff in your body doing that is animated by itself?
I feel like we all kind of have to operate under the assumption of free will. Otherwise, stuff kind of becomes either pointless or, you know, it would change our behavior, right? Like if...
That's sort of the fatalist perspective. If everything is already destined, then why do anything to do anything?
And having that knowledge that everything's destined, and you're making the decision to say like, well, fuck it, I'm not gonna, you know, I'm just gonna live however I want to live because there's no reason behind anything.
Do you not have that attitude already, Mucci?
Yeah,
We'll
you know
find
me.
Well, I think that's an interesting thing.
Yeah.
The determinist aspect of it would just say that the creation of a legal system or of an idea of a society governed by a set of rules that are perceptible to, you know, humans in meat space, that is an inevitable result of
Sounds
literally
like a
the
sci-fi movie, by the
structure
way.
of
Humans in meat space. It's like a B movie.
Yeah, oh, I'd watch that. So it was
think it's called the
idea that
metaverse
a
now.
legal system as a society, that society is itself, that like a portion of Earth organized the way it is an inevitable conclusion of, for example, the way things were at the start of, at the Big Bang. That the collection and organization and structure of that seed, essentially, for the universe at the Big Bang, if that's the theory you want to subscribe to, that is the starting seed of information from which all of existence is just follows, can logically follow according to natural rules. So this actually does give me some hope, because there might be another world where that initial seed at the Big Bang, atom was, well, it wasn't even atoms then, I don't know. Whatever the hell was in that was organized slightly differently, and maybe there's a different world where it wasn't inevitable that I went to law school. That'd be pretty fucking nice. Maybe I did something better with my life. But yeah, that's
You're just
essentially
the
that.
best
This is
podcaster. You're like, you know, you're known as the ultimate, the best podcaster, the father of podcasting.
Oh God!
It actually turned out that he was
You're
a
trying to
video
make me
blogger.
a fatalist now. But yeah. So that's sort of the point, is that even having the idea that fatalism is a thing that can be a description of human behavior, that concept, as being developed as human knowledge, is a result of like the fundamental conditions of the creation of the universe. You know, they kind of talk like this. I don't know. Some people think about determinism as the idea that there's, you know, universe is created as, a watchmaker would make a watch. That there's different pieces that they've put everywhere that interact with one another and create motion, and then from there it just operates predictably.
Yeah.
So you were asking about examples, Lando.
I
Because
sure
you're
was.
texting right now.
I sure was.
About some way to bring this down to actual, to Earth. And so, I think a good way to think about this is the hiker on the path, and there's paths diverging. Mm-hmm. Do you take one or the other? And so, Mucci, correct me if I'm wrong, but in your perspective, there is some kind of choice that is not predetermined, that whether it's from sway or another manifestation of some kind of of some kind of non-material breaking of that causation. That there is a choice between taking one path or the other.
Yeah.
Is that kind of...
Sure.
Okay. So determinism, it's not necessarily a perfect place for it, but it's essentially saying that there are no branching paths. That there might be a network of paths, but your particular route through it, if you knew everything about that person and the conditions in which they were walking at the start of that path, you would know exactly what they're going to take. That there are no untaken branched paths in life. There is just your path.
How does this play out with... and I'm going to bring this up because Spider-Man No Way Home just came out. I haven't seen it yet.
Me neither.
But...
no spoilers. No spoilers, everybody.
No
Don't tweet spoilers at us.
We haven't seen it. So how could we spoil it?
3 months later. No, I'm telling them not to spoil it for us.
Oh. There's something about the multiverse in that movie, right? So how does this... If there were another dimension... How would determinism and free will function there?
What the fuck are you talking about?
That's what
I saw Tobey Maguire.
Oh man, you're missing out.
Fucking, it's pizza time.
He's back.
Sorry, what?
If there's a Pat that's in this world taking his path, say there's another dimension where there's another Pat, is he going to go a different path? Is that route going to be slightly different?
Yeah.
Does he have free will over there?
One
trying to keep
idea
things
of
lively here. Come on.
Oh my god.
A lively, friendly debate.
Yeah. So one of the ideas could be that if we want to consider, not whether they exist, if we want to consider hypothetically the idea of a different universe, then, like I said, if there's this fundamental...
I think we're closer to realizing that than determinism, right?
What?
Multi-dimensions? I think we're closer to that than realizing that everything's determined.
Do you have a point you want to argue,
No,
Lando?
absolutely not. I'm just listening.
Are you saying that we're closer to knowing that because of the comic book movie? Am I to understand that you have read nothing that we've put up and have spent the last week or so just watching movies?
I already said that at the beginning of this.
So yeah, if you had a different start to everything, if you had a different, if there was a different start to things at the Big Bang, the start of the universe, that there could be different things that would happen as a result of that. That if it was different from the start, the conditions afterward would be different. For example, maybe the configuration of stuff at the beginning of the Big Bang, the configuration of that would never create life, never lead to the creation of life on Earth.
But that life, even in that other universe or dimension or whatever, would still operate according to the laws of determinism?
If you wanted it to.
Wait. If
you have the choice.
I have the choice.
If we're hypothetically building...
Yeah.
Putting these building blocks together that are going to form an entire universe that's going to play out over hundreds of billions of years or however old shit is, that the configuration of things at the start is going to necessarily predetermine what's going to happen as that universe runs according to those preconditions. So that you could change a minuscule thing in there and thereby create the reality would be different from ours.
So hypothetically, a different universe could run in a way that doesn't operate according to determinism. Is that what you're saying? Because of one change in how it was formed?
I'm saying for there to be any difference in how things go, we're talking about determinism in a different direction. based
But
on
it's
different
still-
conditions. If
Oh, okay, but it would still be explained by determinism and by the laws of nature because this one thing changed. That's why this universe is, this way.
right,
You still explain it based on determinism. Like, would there be a universe where people have free will?
well, that's kind of what I was asking before.
Yeah.
Is there any manifestation of it, or is free will just the idea that there is something out there imperceivable that is making those changes in atoms' behavior?
Yeah. Well, I mean, what is?
Can you? I mean, I'm just saying. Can you answer the question about where it comes from? Like, if it's not necessarily tangible, then where is free will located?
I think that's kind of the problem, right? Like, we haven't, our science isn't there to determine what goes on in the human brain, really. I mean, there's so much we don't
know what it's made out of.
Yeah, I mean, you can know what something's made out of without knowing how it works. I mean, I don't know how, every electronic piece of equipment in this room works, but, I mean, I'm sure someone does. But I don't, and it still works.
Well, that sort of gets to the thing that humans as imperfect observers of things, that a lot of our... So even like Newtonian gravity, right? It's classical physics. It mostly works if you're ignoring like friction and things like that. Yeah, these perfect bodies in a theoretical way operate according to it. But Einstein came along and introduced the theory of relativity, that it really depends on how different bodies operate. And so, yeah, well, classical, Newtonian physics at the time explained generally how things work. It was imperfect. And so that theory is then reducible to a more fundamental one, where Einstein says, well, actually, there's this element of relativity to it. But if you're talking about an apple falling off a tree, it's such a small, short, localized sort of event that any effect of relativity is, perhaps inobservable to a human.
Well, can I briefly just jump back to the question about the
Please.
part of the brain or things like that? Like, I would argue that or I guess I am going to argue, this is an argument. If you give someone a lobotomy and you cut off part of their prefrontal cortex and they can no longer really make decisions, that's in a way kind of taking away their free will to make decisions from there on out. And that could be an area of the brain where
But just the material change, though.
But their behaviors changed from that. I mean, I'm just explaining that's, a possible part of the brain implicated in decision making. If there are tangible parts of our brain that are implicated in making those decisions, or the amygdala implicated in your rage, anger and rage and whatnot. And if that's
in the same way that we know a gas pedal accelerates a car, a brake pedal stops it, that you have a steering wheel.
And also the way, I mean, I might be completely off base with this, but I guess...
Oh, I hope so.
Determinism being the factor that makes the doctor lobotomize the other person. He's, in fact, determining his future and taking away his quote-unquote free will choice. So it was always determined that that patient was going to have a lack thereof of a choice from
Why is the
there
doctor a
on.
man?
Oh, good catch. Good catch. I apologize.
Yeah, so I guess...
she was operating on her son.
Does that not require that if a change in the material of a person affected their ability to choose, impacted or limited the free will of them, then is free will only present in material sense? Is free will like only literally this collection of cells in your amygdala? Is that where this is free will, that you can cut it out?
I think if you remove a part of the brain that's implicated in that decision making, that affects it, or people with certain disorders that have impaired parts of their brain chemically that influence their ability to make decisions, like or as you mentioned, depression, that can really influence the way that you make decisions and see the world. That there is some explanation there in somewhere in the brain and in the parts of it that decision making for someone who doesn't have those type of disorders or isn't affected in that way can make decisions with maybe more rationality or less clouding of their judgment, because chemically those parts of their brain aren't affected. I don't know.
During this point, I just want to mention we are lawyers. We're not doctors. We're not scientists.
I mean, I have an engineering degree. Speak for yourself.
Oh,
That's the
patent
whole
attorney.
determinism thing appeals to
Excuse
me
me.
because I've taken many years of chemistry.
He's a patent
Excuse
attorney.
me.
What do you?
I was just trying to basically say that we don't know what the fuck we're
we should
talking
really
about.
start off with a selection of our biases or explanation of it, but maybe this is reducing it too
You do.
much.
We
but
don't. Pat does. Orlando and I don't know what we're talking about. Pat does.
Maybe this is reducing it too much, but if you take, the spring out of a watch, well, that's going to change its behavior
Yeah.
without anything internally to the watch having anything to do with it. And so that's the principle, I guess, is what I'm saying, is that if humans are just a machine, you take a part out of it, of course the effect's going to change. But if changes in material can limit how much free will is expressed by a person,
So the
I
amount
find
of,
that kind of defeating.
the amount of complexity in a person that is different than the amount of complexity in a watch, is that not implicated in this removal? And aren't our decisions or our outputs, the way we function, more complex than a watch? Is that explainable by a deterministic approach?
Yeah, I mean, complex systems are
Yeah.
are possible.
Oh, of course. Yeah, I know.
It's a complex system of matter. But I really like that we're going here because
Yeah.
this is something I'm actually really interested in. Does my cat have free will? Like he's got a fucking walnut-sized brain, and I'm just like, Profi, be good. And I tell him, he's like hopped up on the planter, the shelf, like he's gonna eat our plants. I'm like, Profi, make good decisions. And he kind of looks at me. Then he doesn't eat the plants. Does my cat have free will? Or is he just a complete fucking bastard?
I would say no. I would say your cat's a bastard. Yeah.
Okay.
No, I would say
Good to have this. He just knows he's a piece of shit.
Hey,
used to be.
Yeah, it used to be. People can change. Cats can change.
I love my old cat.
No, I think I don't think animals have free will. Although I don't know that I have a real great way of explaining that, other than just the fact that humans are more complex organisms, and we've done way more complex things and made huge buildings and advanced technology, done things that cats couldn't ever be able
My
to
cat
do.
just scoops litter.
Yeah, have you ever
buries his
seen one of
poos.
those videos where a cat is like on some kind of ledge or something, sees something, and just for no fucking reason just swats it off? That's a choice. That's got to be a choice.
Well,
Okay, maybe
I
cats-
I think it's my cat's hungry, and so
He's hangry,
yeah,
trying to get your attention.
So
Here's
does
a
a
question.
child have free will? Unless you have something that you want to proceed with, our
No.
dear moderator.
I do. So I had a question
Oh, please.
that I kind of wanted. We kind of went over it a while back, but say your position is just like we wake up tomorrow, and your position is just completely accepted by all of humankind for whatever reason. Everyone's just like, okay, the grand scheme behind everything is determinism, or people knew for a fact that we all have free will and nothing is determined for us, and it's just free will. How would that affect the world, people in general, like day-to-day lives, countries, interactions?
Well, that's where you think you get into the maybe morality aspect of it, or
Oh, yeah.
the responsibility. Like people who, if everyone tomorrow woke up and absolutely believed in free will and that their decisions mattered and doing good things helped people and had a positive outcome for them, and doing bad things was the reverse, and it's not all random and or it's not all determined for them, then you have people acting
even
more mindfully.
randomness, I think, opens the door better for free will.
Really? Oh, yeah. Okay. Maybe that was a misspoke there. But I mean,
Actual
it's some-
unpredictability.
something
would be
that
great.
something that I did look into as I was researching was like these sort of religious aspects of it. I know we're not really going to get down that road too much, but the idea in religion, and especially Christian religions, that we're supposed to do good things in this life for kind of an eternal reward, and it's not just in Christianity, but also Buddhism. Like, do good things in this life so that when reincarnated, you get closer and closer to nirvana. And
Great band.
Oh, they're in hell.
Closer to the front of the stage?
Yeah.
Like,
No, I think, but that was a way for influencing behavior and teaching people to act in ways that were good with the promise of some kind of eternal reward. And even if you take that away and just have people, if you were in a world where people believe in free will, people are doing good things for good things' sake, for the sake of doing good.
Yeah, I mean, operating according to it seems like a decent principle. I certainly judge people on a sense of morality, but the determinist perspective is sort of just that, well, if everything is predetermined, shit just happens. Mm-hmm. And so the system of morals that society is judged by is just an idea, a piece of information that has been created by, this sort of fundamental state of being.
So how would that affect the world if everyone believed in that position?
But for free will, though, you think that people would just do things, like do good things for the sake of doing good things? Do you think anything would change, like, tomorrow? Like, would anybody act any differently? I guess.
The thing is, like, I feel like
kind of the situation. I feel like most people overwhelmingly believe in some exercise of free will.
Right. So
that's like the sense of the mind.
Yeah.
Your mind, I don't think, operates in a way that it implies determinism, but, we can go into theory of the mind later. Mm-hmm. We can talk about what it is like to be a bat. Very excited. Thomas Nagel.
That's right, yeah.
Great dude.
Would it also, you're kind of assuming that they would do good things for the sake of doing good things.
Yeah.
Whereas people absolutely do bad things because they want to do bad things.
It's fun to do bad things.
It's fun to do bad things. But I think...
You think if people thought absolutely free will is what's the bee's knees and this is what it is, free will.
The bee's knees.
You think that people would start doing things for the good of other people? Like they would change that way?
Or with the belief that, like Aristotle is like, I think people generally want to be good. They want to be virtuous, good people. And a lot of people who do bad things think they're... No, well, it's not.
You asked the question.
A lot of people
Objection leading.
who do bad things think that they're good. And I think also a lot of people who do bad things think, oh, it doesn't matter. Like, you can... If you believe that none of this matters and that it's all determined and I'm just acting according to, principles of it's all determined for me, I think you have more... just people acting without a care, or acting poorly. Whereas I think as humans, most people do want to be good.
That's what I think is a different topic.
They're good.
Whether man is good or evil.
I would love to talk about good and evil, morality, the human condition.
Yeah.
That's going to be... We should do a
That's
sort
of tangential, topic. I think, to
Yeah.
the discussion if we're trying to limit it here. But
sure. But Pat, go ahead with determinism if you want to.
Oh, yeah. I mean, like I said before, the whole idea in determinism essentially is that morality is a separate question. People are going to act how they're going to act. That the system of, like, values, so to speak, these human ideas of how to regulate behavior are predetermined. That's just the way it is. The society acts according to free will as if that were true. Determinism says that isn't, but people act that way, so that's how society unfolds. I don't know if our dear moderator is trying to wrap things up, but I did have one question.
No, so I was curious what you think would happen in the world or within people themselves if...
I'm saying it is the current world. It is the same.
No,
if
for
everyone
determinism.
believes that. If everyone, as opposed to what it is now, believe that they have free will, if everyone woke up tomorrow and was like 100% convinced of, no, it's determinism.
How would that affect the world and how would that affect people individually?
I think that's this question, yeah.
Say our current world is governed by deterministic principles. Mm-hmm. It could exist as it is. And what I'm saying is that there would be no difference because the current world we live in where people operate according to an idea they have that free will is true, even if that is not true, that people operate according to free will, the result of a society structured on perhaps a false belief in free will
so you think
is
that they
predetermined.
So you think that they would never accept the concept of determinism for an absolute fact?
What I'm saying is our current world as it is now can be, or in the strongest sense here, is governed by determinism, regardless of what people individually might think. That's how broad or overreaching the theory is. So you want to see a society that's governed by determinism, literally look around you. Yeah, so I mean, if someone woke up, like you said, we were talking tomorrow, and all of a sudden realized or had internalized, I think this idea, the theory of the mind, the operation of mind, realized that determinism was true, I don't necessarily think that's any different. I wake up in the morning and I think that, like, yeah, determinism is probably right, but I still conduct my fucking life as a somebody who has agency.
Do you think
that
society's...
the mind, the little piece of meat in my head controlling my body, has, I believe, some volitional aspect of it, some agents.
So you think societies would just continue as they are?
Yeah, I mean, unless you change the initial conditions to just have, like, the concept of free will not exist in your universe.
Is there a difference between free will and agency?
Yeah, it really depends on how you want to use the term. I mean, in the strictest sense, like, having control over your, like, I think of agency in a sociological sense of having some control over your conditions. Mm-hmm. I think in terms of our conversation, volition might be the better term, just that you can will or manifest your thought into an action of your body. And so in as much as my mind is limited to the space that it is, that a thought that I have can force me to have a very violent hand motion in your direction, Mucci, as has been happening this entire time. That is like the mere understanding I have in my head, regardless of a categorical truth. I can only know so much.
So
And the clockwork of my mind operates as if, or subscribing to a belief in free will, regardless of whether that's actually true.
We come here to record this podcast, and you sit down in front of your microphone, and everything you're saying is determined by who you are, and everything leading up to this moment that makes you who you are results in you making those hand motions and saying exactly what you're saying right now.
I'm not just being flippant, but yes,
yeah.
Actually. That is the logical extension of it.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that's kind of the weak point here. The gap is that, okay, you can look at like a single cell or a single chemical and be like, yeah, okay, these principles here are simple, but a model that would contain all the information necessary to predict human behavior is like so far beyond what like a single person or even anything humanity could create could possibly understand. Okay. So, and we're really pushing toward the edge. Determinism really pushes past the edge of human conception, human knowledge, and kind of argues categorically whether something can be known, is a piece of information, regardless of whether we as people can know it.
Okay, so from what I'm gathering, determinism, edgy punk rock, free will,
edgy
country music. Is that what we're getting at? Something like that?
Why don't you let us choose the best genre of music? Because I think there's mutual disagreement on that.
Why country music?
I don't know. I don't like country music.
So you don't like free will?
I don't really have that many questions for you. If someone wants to start off with a closing argument.
All right, Mucci. So since I started this episode, do you want to start with the closing?
I'll just be brief. Humans have free will. It's what separates us from animals and from a machine that is going to act in a predetermined way, a set way. Because every decision that we encounter is a decision. You choose to do something or not to do something, or not to make a choice at all sometimes. We are made up of our behaviors, and our experiences throughout life shape us into who we are and make certain decisions more likely than others. But, I can be irrational sometimes. I can act in a way that is outrageous or stupid. Amanda's nodding.
Yeah.
Even though that meant, I might act in a way that's out of character for me, and I've made a choice to act that way. I mean, yes, I might act a certain way because I'm angry or I'm sad, and that is maybe a somewhat determined set of impulses in me, or the way my atoms and brain chemistry is structured, making me act a certain way. But even in that state of mind, I'm making individual decisions. I have free will. We all have free will to make a decision.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks, Mucci. Pat?
So in a brief closing on my side, we sort of established in the beginning and throughout the idea that there are fundamental parts of everything that operate according to natural laws. And if everything can be known on an information theory, if you can have the snapshot of how everything is at a certain instant, everything after it can be determined according to those laws. Everything that led up to that instant can be determined according to those fundamental natural laws. Essentially, as it results to a complex organism such as a human and complex organization of humans like a society, humans are basically a marionette subject to the pools of strings that we cannot perceive. And to misquote a CCR lyric that I looked up today and realize I've misheard my entire life, I just gotta say, and I wonder, still I wonder, who's got the reins? Which I found out on the way here is actually who's gonna stop the rain. Or who will stop the rain. So I'm just gonna leave it at that.
Awesome.
Get Mucci a paper bag. He's hyperventilating.
All right, guys. I appreciate it. Everybody, it seemed like you guys both did a lot of research on this. I guess what we could say for my ruling here is that it was pretty predetermined who was going to win this. I mean, Pat just, when we came up with this topic, you know what? I think he might have been the one coming up with the topic.
Oh, yeah, I was just shitposting the Excel sheet we had for ideas.
He's just so much more well-versed to begin with. It wasn't captured in this podcast, but off the record, Mucci was already swayed during the episode. So this one's going to go to Pat.
Fuck yeah! All right, get one in my column. This is like, what, 1 for 4?
Mucci, you don't get any type of decimal points on this one, so...
No brownie points?
No point.
Not at all. So, yeah, stay tuned, everyone listening. Our friend Maddie is going to be on the next episode. So, it's been OTR, a friendly debate.